Okay, so I'm going to be going through the submission process for this assignment. If you look in the assignment brief, what you'll see is there's a list of things that I've asked you to produce for this submission. I'm going to go through each. Obviously, me producing a 10-15 minute video whilst doing this is going to be implausible, so all of the stuff in question I've already produced. And I'm just going to go through the details of it. So the first one is the actual video. For this, I've put together this is my kind of folder of stuff that I've prepared. So within this, you won't see a video file. The reason that's the case is because one of the options that I'm offering as part of this submission is you can choose to have your video either on your CD, or you can upload it onto a website and include it via a link. That's what I've done with this video. So I can access the video via a README file. Now, there's a variety of software available for recording video with. Some examples like Bandicam, I think off the top of my head, it's QuickTime for Mac, which I use to record all my videos. If you just search on the web, there's a variety of free ones available. I know Duke personally suggested Bandicam because you can record like 10 minutes of footage and there's just a little watermark at the top of it. So I'll put a link in the description, but if you take a look at the video, I've made sure the video is less than 15 minutes. And yeah, it's a summary of explaining how kind of the game works. Yeah, and that's kind of like a rough summary of how the game's put together. Talking through the core functionality of the project. There's several things that I just kind of wanted to talk about as part of that. The first thing is making sure that you have a good microphone, whether that's borrowing one from the studio, or just using something like a headphone connected into your microphone jack. I didn't know you could do that. It's really useful. There's a thing that you can do. One thing that's also worth noting is if you're doing a submission, obviously you're going to be using your Flash file. One thing to keep in mind is that the web tends to not handle these files very well. Sorry, your Flash files tend to not be handled very well. So what you can do is you can click and drag it into the browser. Turn that on a little bit. And you can essentially, with it running the screen capture software and your game at the same time, sometimes it can become a bit unstable, Flash. So if you run it in the browser, it'll become a bit more stable, gameplay for whilst you're capturing it, which is, yeah, I would appreciate rather than having really shaky, jaggedy, footage. So you got two options for that. You could either open up your stencil game and run it in the click run in the browser, or you could literally click and drag your game over to the browser and do it that way. Yeah. So some other things as well. Make sure to rehearse what you're going to say, before you record it. The reason for that is just when you run through it again, it'll be a lot more succinct. And there'll be less, likelihood of you missing things. And if you're afraid that you're not going to either if you're afraid that you're not going to be able to kind of cover everything in the time you've got, you'll become a lot more succinct if you run through it again rather than just waffling or just getting stumbling upon bits. And other than that, just make sure that your audio for your project, if you have any sound, is turned to a minimum. I can always listen to any audio that you've got implemented in. But if I can't hear what you're saying in your commentary because there's some kind of really loud music playing or some really loud gunshots or something like that, yeah, that's going to make it difficult for me to listen to your project or listen to what you're saying. Other than that, test your microphone before you submit and before you record. There's nothing worse than recording 10 minutes of mute footage. Even worse if you just submit it without thinking. And then lastly, make sure when you're doing this video submission that you actually take the time, factor in the time that you're going to need to upload your video. Whether that be burning it onto the CD or uploading it online. Because either way you're going to need either a link or some kind of, access to that file. And I've seen in the past people who are meant to be submitting stuff with 15 minutes to go realize that they have 20 minutes of upload time or 18 minutes of time to burn to disk. Just things that cut it very, very close. So just give yourself enough time to actually get these things uploaded. Yeah, so that kind of covers everything for the video, for producing the video. I'll probably also put up an extra document running through kind of the basics. I mean, we've covered it in class quite extensively, so yeah, I think that should probably cover it. Just make sure it's a usable format, but other than that, let's just move on to the next few things. So, kind of gets easier from here. You've got your .stencil file, which is essentially just an export of your project. The way you do that, if I just open up my submission, the example I put together, I go File, Export Game. It literally will just begin to export the file. What's nice with this is it'll export all the assets involved in it, so you don't have to worry about them not being linked or anything like that. And yeah, what you'll get is essentially a project, project name. So Alexander Johansson.stencil or something like that. I prefer it to be your name because then I can obviously, if I've got a stack of those projects all loaded into my version of Stencil at home, I can easily differentiate between whose project is which. So give it the proper name, which is your own name, so I can differentiate, and then just click Save. If you don't have that option available, I've just clicked Cancel, but on yours it'll link you to where the file's been saved. If this is grayed out here, if you close your game and then just right-click and export from the basic center, that should do it equally fine from there. Yep. The next thing is going to be saving out your actual code for your project. So if you take a look at my submission, I've got this folder called Code Images, which basically has all of my code for my projects saved as PNGs. Yeah, and labeled correctly, which is important. And yeah, so it's so I can kind of just look in and see how everything's laid out, and in some cases quite extremely, but I can always literally go into those files and look at them better. Yeah. And what you'll also notice is that the code is actually commented, so you can see I've written little notes for each how each piece of code works, and the functionality of things, just kind of showing that I have the knowledge there of what I've built, rather than, you know, for example, if I've snaffled it off the web, then, you know, I'm not going to be able to say, you know, how things are working as concisely. So I'll cover both of those things now, just real quick. So let me just quickly grab. I don't know if there's anything that I haven't covered in this project. I don't think I've done the mission complete. Oh, I have. Okay. Just give me a quick moment. I'm trying to think if there's anything I haven't commented. I'll tell you what. There's the player 2 actor that exists in the project, but I haven't actually used. So if I open him up, go to events. So if I was wanting to create like a chunk of comment for this here. So if I wanted to create a comment for this, I literally just go over to the search bar, type in the word comment, and it'll bring up these options here. I can go click it, find in palette, and it'll bring up the drop down of where they are. It's under flow, debug. You'll have the access options there. Let's drag one of these in, and wherever I'm kind of wanting to refer to, I'll put the code in line with it. So you know, if player 2 collides with platform 1, with the platformer, and up is down, 2 up key is down, set no speed, something like that. It's like a nice kind of short description of a summary of the code above, and you know, don't feel like you have to cram all of it into one comment box. You know, if you look at some of the other ones I've done, I'm trying to find a good example. You know, things like the camera or the player, I think. Can't find one here. Like, for example, here I've split it between two. Most of them I've done in one summary, but if you go into the player, for example, or the bullets, I think as well, you'll see that I've got actually, you know, going all the way down in some cases, kind of short breakdowns throughout of what each chunk of code is doing. And yeah, once you've kind of decided on that, what you can do is, if you're thinking that you're going to have to go through every single one of these and export them separately, thankfully, one thing that's quite useful is there's this little button down here. I'll just kind of hover over it. This take screenshot chunk of code. Sorry, little thing you can click on. And what it'll do is it'll export that as all that chunk of code as a PNG, and then you can choose where to save it. So, and then just make sure to give it a useful name that I can use to recognize. Player 2 code, you know, .png. The only reason I got something different up there was because I accidentally clicked on the .stencil file. And yeah, that'll export it, and then it'll take you to where it is, and then you could just, you know, add it to that code images folder. Now, as part of the submission as well, so yeah, once you've exported all of those for each of your actors, make sure you label them and give them a decent name. Other than that, publish your game as an SWF. Make sure to test it enough times to make sure it's functional and it runs properly and there's no kind of reasons for it to crash. If you've got it at a small size, the actual game, and you want to increase it to like a larger size for the final kind of playable thing, if you go to settings and go to web, you can alter the scale of the game. Just a quick heads up, if you haven't got this ticked here, ×3 won't work. You'll end up with a bunch of white blocks for your game, which is not very useful. Yeah, you can put it in full screen mode to start with if you want. It's up to you. I honestly don't mind. I know how to scale it up to full screen if needs be. And if anything, it can sometimes cause it to become a little bit unstable if it's in full screen mode. You know, because you know, if needs be, I'll just drag it into the browser to make it run a bit smoother whilst I'm playing it. So once you've set all that up, it's literally you just go publish web and then flash. Once you've done that, it'll export it as an SWF. You just need to choose the location, the way you're going to save it. But yeah, and that should be it. Just give it, as I said, give it a decent name, so you know I can look through it and know, you know, whose is whose. Nice and easy. Shouldn't take more than, you know, the time it usually takes to compile. It might just be the fact that my computer's just running a little bit slow. Yeah, and once you've done that, the only thing that's really left to do after that is, oh, sorry, that's just loaded. So then you know, just save it as an SWF and export it, and then after that, it should literally just, you know, instantly do it. And then if I just quickly open this up, there's my project playable there. Cool. I'm just going to quickly get rid of that. So the only other kind of two things that we need to do is there's your actual kind of concept that you originally came up with. Now you should have your original designs and ideas that you came up with. If you want to kind of formalize those into something that's a bit more presentable, I took a screenshot of my project, or you know, took a kind of a photo of my level. I'll show you a quick example of how to do that. All I'm kind of wanting to see is for you to, you know, essentially, for you to take those kind of original elements that you talked about, you know, when we originally discussed your project, and just annotate them and put them in a manner that I can kind of see how the original idea that you came up with, how that how that corresponds to what you've produced. Yeah, so if you want to take a screenshot of your project, you literally just click that little camera tool there, and that'll allow you to capture a PNG. Then you can just edit that in Photoshop and just put some labels on it or something like that, and that should be fine. So yeah, if I just save that as a PNG, if I then, you know, crop that down, and then, as I said, there's some, even if it's just like something as basic as just creating like a you know, a bunch of just basic text boxes and arrows. You know, you could mock it up in something like PowerPoint if you wanted. I've kind of done it in a fancy manner. Just as long as it's clear and it explains how everything's linked together, yeah, that should be good. So then the only other thing that you need to do is have some kind of text file explaining if there's anything that you didn't produce, just letting me know what it was. For example, in mine, I used someone else's music for my project. The sound that was produced, I used an online tool to make it, and then there was 2 behaviors that I used code from. Yeah, and then in there as well, as I said, there's the video link. But other than that, that should be pretty much it for the submission. The only thing else to kind of cover is going to be the cover sheets. I've got to check this one with Duke. I just need to know, because I think I need to kind of send in like a submission for the. I basically just need to make sure they're updated before the submission. But I'll get back to you on that to let you know how where the cover sheet fits in. But just to kind of summarize that last bit, it needs to be submitted physically. So what you'll be doing is handing it in on CD or USB to the office on the first floor. If you want to hand it in there, that would be really useful. Get that in before it closes. Remember that it's obviously not a 12 o'clock submission. They won't be there at midnight. To make sure to get that in before they close, which may be earlier on a Friday. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, and if you have any questions in this last week before the submission, just please get in touch. Most of you've got, know how to contact me via email. Yeah, other than that, very best of luck getting everything together. Remember that if you look at the rubric, I don't know if I have it available. Probably one of the most important things is to look at the rubric, because even if you don't feel like you've got everything there for your project, these things like commented code and each of these areas that I've described. Oh, and there's also, as part of the rubric, obviously the robustness of the environment you've built. Like, just going back to what's going on up here, like, just from the submission being correct, like, there's 40% of marks that could be lost if you don't make that submission right. So even a good project could lose, potentially, a large amount of marks just if they just submit their basic game. So make sure to get the submission right before you kind of submit, and give yourself enough time to get it done right. Because yeah, I know it's difficult to kind of, especially with things being done at last minute, to kind of panic and let these things slip. But yeah, that should be everything. Very best of luck.